So now that we're done with our routing, we really want to make the board look good. So all this yellow font and designators that you have on here, these will actually be printed onto your board in a white silk screen. So what we have right now would not really work because you can see we have silk over component pads and here they're all over the place. So we need to actually arrange them so that later on we have them as references when we solder our board together. So let me move all these into place. But before we actually do that, let's make them look nicer, because this font here is like an old school string font, doesn't really look nice. So what we can do is we can click on one of them, right click, find similar objects. What we want to have them that there are a designator. We click OK, and immediately Altium selected all the designators. Now you should have a tab over here that's called the PCB inspector. If you don't have it, you can click on PCB inspector and the tab will turn up. And the text kind here, you will see that's a stroke font. We don't really want that. What we want to change this to is a true type font. And as you can see, is the font immediately gets smaller, nicer rounded, and it actually shows the font itself as I think it's a Helvetica, but I'm not 100% sure, Arial down here. And if you want, you could go and actually choose a different font. Choose a font that's actually looking nice and that you would like your board to have. All right, let me move these designators around close to the different pieces that we have, and then we will go from there. All right, now that we have moved everything around, except this one here, you might have noticed that I rotated all of them in a certain way. I try to usually align the part number with the part. Doesn't always work. Here it worked, these worked, here it worked too, but for these here I actually moved them outside because I wanted space over here for what you will see in a second what we do with that. What you also notice is that sometimes we have a hole here, and you really will have a physically hole there. So if you have, for example, a capacitor, you can try to put the C over it such that the hole will be in the center, and thus you can still read the C around it, and we can see what this looks like in reality later on once the PCB is manufactured. All right, now we have all the different labels, but we have a lot of empty space all over the place. So we can make our board look even nicer. For example, if you go here to the bottom, and you might have to scroll left or right, but you can click on the top overlay. That's the overlay and the layer that all this text is on. And if you hit P, you can actually write on top of it. You can write a string. And if you double click it, you can again choose the different type. You can type it as a true type font. Let's make a capital U for University of Utah, and this will just be a U right now. But if you actually click on the font name here on your system, there's probably a font installed that's called the Utah font. And if you write a capital U in the Utah font, you get the University of Utah sign. So let's make this slightly bigger. We double click on this one here. 60 mil, let's do 200. Let's move this up here at the top. And what I will do is I will actually place a component. That's my signature. I added my signatures as footprints into the system. You can do that from bitmaps and other techniques that you can put different designators and different text on here. And I actually sign my board here that I know that this is my board. Usually what you can hide this one here. And usually the other thing that I add is a date code, so I remember when this board was made. So in my case, this is 12/30/2013. Again, I want this to actually be a true type font, and I'm gonna move this down here in the bottom left corner. So the last thing we want to do is, now we have our logo, we have our name, we have a date code. But what about these connectors? So once you make this board, you will always have to go back to your schematics and hope that you still have them and to find out what these different connectors are. So why don't we just write the labels on here? And that's fairly simple. We can do a place a string. Let's first get the properties of it right. We wanted a true type font. And let's rotate it around. And in this case, let's look at the schematics, and I'm going to pull it up on the other screen so I actually can see it while I'm typing. So this here would be P1.0, and I'm Control-Cing it, and then we just copy it from left to right. All right, and this would be the board that we can start to manufacture, which will be the next step.